Portland, Oregon, October. The kind of night that swallows everything whole. Rain falls on a street that doesn't care who you are. It falls on the taxi drivers and the delivery workers and the woman with the $2 billion company who is standing in the middle of it all, soaking wet, next to a motorcycle that won't start. She looks one way, then the other, nothing open, nothing warm, nothing, except one light at the end of the block. Yellow gold behind a rain-blurred window. Small, steady, the kind of light that means someone is still there when everyone else has gone home. She stands in the rain for a moment, just one moment, and then she walks toward it. She doesn't know yet what's waiting for her inside that garage. She doesn't know about the man, the little girl, the lopsided pancakes. She doesn't know that the engine dying on Belmont Street was the best thing that ever happened to her. She just knows the light is on, and she is so tired of standing in the dark. She left a $2.6 billion company, a diamond ring, and a man who didn't know her favorite color. She found everything she was looking for in a garage on Belmont Street. But that comes later. First, there were pancakes. Owen Calloway made them every morning. Not because he was hungry, not because it was fast or easy, because Becca had taught him how, 4 years ago in this same kitchen, standing at this same stove. Her hair still messy from sleep, laughing at him for flipping too early. She always said wait for the bubbles. He never could. The batter went in, the pan hissed. Owen watched the edges and pressed the spatula down anyway, the way he always did, the way Becca always told him not to. Some habits survived grief intact. That was one of them. The kitchen was small. Yellow walls Becca had picked from a paint chip the size of a postage stamp. She'd stood in the hardware store for 10 minutes holding it up to the light. Owen had been thinking about a transmission job waiting back at the garage. About June's school supplies. About anything except paint colors. He would give a lot to be standing in that hardware store right now. The clock on the microwave read 5:52. He cut the pancake into a heart shape, same as every morning. It never came out right. Too lopsided on the left. Becca's came out perfect every time, and she never used a cutter. Just the back of a spoon and something he couldn't name and didn't try to. He put the lopsided heart on the blue plate, set it on the table, poured the coffee, sat down, looked at the chair across from him. Empty. He heard the small feet on the stairs before he saw her. June came down in mismatched socks, one striped, one with a small strawberry on the ankle. Hair in 2 crooked pigtails that Owen had attempted at 6:15 and mostly failed. She climbed up onto her chair with the focused gravity of someone completing an important task. Looked at the pancake. Looked at Owen. It's crooked again, Daddy. I know, Mommies were rounder. I know. June picked up her fork. Stabbed the lopsided heart directly in the center. Took a bite. Chewed slowly. The way she always chewed when she was working through something. Daddy. Yeah, I dreamed about Mommy last night. Owen set his coffee cup down, carefully. Yeah? She was teaching me to bake cookies. June swung her feet under the chair. Didn't look up. She said, you're real good at fixing cars. A pause. Another bite. But terrible at cookies. Owen's chest did the thing it still did. 2 years later, and it still did it every time. He laughed. Low and quiet. The kind that came from somewhere real. She's not wrong. June looked up then. Smiled the smile that was completely Becca's. The one that started slow and then took over everything. She said she wasn't worried about us, though. Said it simply. The way children said enormous things, like they weighed nothing at all. She said we're gonna be okay. Owen looked at his daughter for a long moment. She was right about that too. He stood up to wash his plate. Kept his back turned a little longer than he needed to. Outside the kitchen window, Belmont Street was still dark. One streetlight throwing an orange circle on the wet pavement. Dot's Bakery across the way dark until 6. The garage sign at the end of the block unlit. His garage. 6 years now. He'd bought it from a man named Ted who'd run it for 30 years and wanted to retire to Bend. Owen had seen the listing when Becca was 8 months pregnant with June. He'd told Becca it was too much. Too much money, too much risk, too much of everything. Becca had driven past it twice, stood in front of the wooden sign and said, you're buying it. He'd bought it. He almost always did what Becca said. He still almost did 2 years after, out of habit. Out of love, out of the particular stubbornness of a man who knew a good thing when he'd had it. He dried his hands, turned around. June had finished the pancake and was packing her backpack with the careful precision of someone who had a system. School in 20, he said. I know. Shoes on the right feet this time. They were on the right feet yesterday. They were on the wrong feet yesterday, June. She looked up, considered. They felt fine. He picked up his coffee and went to open the garage. 300 miles south. Give or take. Same dark sky pressing against the same kind of window. Different world entirely. Sloane Whitfield stood at the glass of her office on the 36th floor and looked out at Seattle waking up slow. The water in the bay had that flat pewter color it got before sunrise, like something waiting to be decided. On her desk, a contract, $400 million, 12 pages, yellow sticky tabs on every signature line, placed there the night before by her assistant Greg. Very neat, very organized. Everything Greg did was neat and organized. It was why she'd hired him 6 years ago, and why she'd kept him through 4 funding rounds and 2 office relocations, and the year the servers went down on a product launch and she hadn't slept for 3 days straight. The contract had been sitting on her desk for 11 days. She'd picked it up twice, put it down twice. Tonight she hadn't touched it at all. Her phone buzzed. Garrett. She watched his name light the screen. Watched it buzz a second time. A third time. Let it go to voicemail. Went back to looking at the water. She had met Garrett Hale at a conference 2 years ago. He was the best-looking man in the room. She knew immediately that was a stupid reason to speak to someone. She spoke to him anyway. He was sharp. Genuinely funny at first. He asked good questions over dinner and he remembered what she answered. For about 6 months. After that, the questions stopped. The assumptions started. And somehow, in the space between a good first year and a bad second one, she had still said yes when the question came. The restaurant had no sign out front. The kind of place that didn't need one because everyone who needed to know already knew. White tablecloths. Lighting designed to make everyone look like they were in a photograph. The ring was already on the table when she sat down. Small velvet box open angled toward her, very deliberate, like a pitch deck. Like he had rehearsed the angle, he was smiling. The smile he used in meetings. I've been thinking about timing, he said. This makes sense. Our combined assets create a real foundation. Your tech portfolio and my family's holdings. There's genuine synergy here, Sloane. Synergy. He used that word at a marriage proposal. She kept her face neutral. What's my favorite color, Garrett? He blinked. One quick recalibration, navy blue. He said it like it was obvious. Like he was certain. Sloane's favorite color was not navy blue. It had never been navy blue. Her favorite color was the color of dry Montana soil after a long summer. The fields behind her grandmother's house. Earth that cracked open and showed you what was underneath when it finally rained. She had told him that, 14 months ago at this same restaurant, their 6-month dinner. He had nodded, ordered the sea base. She sat with that for one moment. Then she stood up. Didn't pick up the ring, didn't explain. Just looked at Garrett Hale, who was still smiling because he hadn't caught up yet, and said quietly, "Good night, Garrett." Walked out through the white tablecloths. Pushed through the glass door. Stood on the sidewalk in the cold Seattle air. Breathed, first real breath all evening. Her car was 2 blocks over. She walked past it, kept walking. The parking garage on 3rd Avenue was where she kept the Harley. She'd bought it herself for her 30th birthday. A gift for surviving the first 30 years. She'd ridden it exactly twice. Both times around the block. Both times in the rain. It had been under a cover for 14 months. She pulled the cover off. And stood there looking at it. And thought, why not? Why not right now? She didn't go back to the office. Didn't go home for a bag. Didn't call Greg or leave a note. Or do any of the 12 rational things a person was supposed to do. Before getting on a motorcycle at 9:30 at night. And heading south with no plan. She just went. She drove for a long time. Past the city limits. Past the suburbs that stretched out like Seattle didn't know where to stop. Past Tacoma. Past Olympia. Into the dark corridor of highway where trees pressed close on both sides and the only light came from what the headlamp threw forward. She'd grown up in a town in Montana so small the grocery store doubled as the post office and sometimes the polling place. Her mother cleaned office buildings from midnight to 6. Her father welded at a shop 20 miles outside town. They worked hard, said little, and loved each other the way people loved when they were too tired for drama. Just steady, just present. Sloane had gotten a scholarship to MIT, first in her family to go to college. She remembered sitting in her mother's kitchen the night before she left. Her mother made coffee and they didn't talk much. Just sat together in the kitchen that smelled like dish soap and the small pot of lavender her mother kept on the sill. Outside, the fields were dark all the way to the horizon. "You're going to do big things," her mother said finally. Sloane had nodded. She had done big things that felt tonight at 31, like someone else's achievements, like a biography of a person she used to know. The rain started near the Oregon border, not the polite Seattle drizzle. Real rain, the kind that came sideways, the kind that soaked through a jacket in 4 minutes and turned the road into a dark mirror. She slowed down, squinted through the visor, kept going, because stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant figuring out the contract and the ring and the 11 years of building something so large she could no longer remember what she'd been building it for. And so she kept moving, stayed in front of it, until the engine decided for her. It coughed twice, then quit. Just like that, out on Belmont Street in Portland at 10:17 on a Tuesday night in October. No warning, no gradual slowdown. Just gone. She coasted to the curb, sat there, rain coming down hard. She got off the bike, tried to restart it. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. Her phone had died sometime around Olympia. She'd watched the battery at 12% and thought, "I'll charge it later." She hadn't. She looked up and down Belmont Street, a bar with lights off, a bookstore dark, a laundromat doing whatever laundromats did at 10 at night, a coffee shop closed, a vintage clothing store with a ghost of a display in the window, and at the far end of the block near the corner, one light, warm, yellow gold behind a garage window. She could see tools on a pegboard through the glass, the corner of a truck up on a lift. A work light throwing that particular amber of someone still working when everyone else went home. A wooden sign above the door. Painted letters, black on white, slightly faded at one edge, Callaway's Auto. She stood in the rain, because she was Sloane Whitfield. She had built a $2.6 billion company from a one-bedroom apartment and a laptop with a cracked hinge. She did not need to walk into a stranger's garage and ask for help. She was a person who handled things. She handled everything. She walked toward the light. The bell above the door was the old kind. Actual metal. A real clang. Not a sensor, not a chime. Just a bell on a spring that told you someone was there whether you wanted to know or not. Owen looked up from the engine he was working on. A woman stood in the doorway, soaked through, dark jacket. Dark hair flat against her face. Helmet under one arm. She looked at the garage, then at him, then at the garage again. Like she was still deciding. "You open?" she said. Lights on. She came in. Owen watched her the way mechanics watched people who came through the door, wet and uncertain. Not rude. Just reading. The jacket was good leather, well made and not new. The boots were practical. The way she stood, arms loose, weight balanced, was not nervous. She was tired and wet and doing her best not to show either. He'd seen a lot of people come through that door. Taxi drivers, delivery workers, a college kid once who'd wrapped his car around a mailbox and paid in crumpled fives. A woman who sat down and cried for 10 minutes before she could explain that actually nothing was wrong with the car at all. This woman wasn't going to cry. He could tell that right off. "What happened?" he said. "Bike died, out on the block. Won't restart." She looked at the small pool of water collecting at her feet on his floor. "Sorry about that." "Floor's seen worse. Where is it?" "Corner, blue Harley." He grabbed his jacket off the hook by the door. Took the flashlight from the bench. Went out into the rain without another word, and she followed him. And that was how it started. The Harley was where she said. Owen crouched down, ran the light along the frame. He checked the obvious things first, the way his father had shown him before his father showed him much else. Start with what you can see. Don't jump to complicated before you've ruled out simple. Fuel line clogged. He could see it plainly. Bike had been sitting too long without being run. Fuel settled, line gummed up at the intake. 45 minutes of work. Maybe an hour. He stood up, rain running off the back of his collar. "Fuel line's blocked," he said. "Probably from sitting unused. Can you fix it tonight?" "Yes. But I want to wait for the rain to ease before I work it." "Better dry." He nodded back toward the garage. "Come in." Inside, she stood just past the doorway while he hung his jacket back on the hook. He felt her looking around. The pegboard and the tools arranged by size. The thank you letters tacked near the door. A drawing June had done of a race car with 6 wheels because she'd decided more wheels meant faster. "How much?" she said. $50. She looked at him, full stop. Like he'd spoken in a different language. "That's it?" "That's the job." I can pay more. Owen set the flashlight on the bench, turned around and looked at her properly for the first time. Not reading now, just looking. Why would you pay more than the job's worth? She opened her mouth, closed it, stood there with her answer missing. Owen went back to the engine he'd been working on before she arrived. The question wasn't rhetorical. It was real. And in his experience, people who couldn't answer it usually needed a minute to find out why. The rain drummed on the tin roof. He worked. She stood near the door, not fidgeting, not pulling out a phone. Just letting the silence be what it was. Most people couldn't do that, he noticed. Then June appeared, out of the back. Sock feet. One striped, one with a small strawberry on the ankle. Yellow sun pajamas, hair still in the crooked pigtails from that morning. Half a peanut butter sandwich in one hand. She stopped when she saw the woman, looked at her, looked at Owen. Looked back at the woman. You're wet, June said. I know. Did you fall in a puddle? Kind of. My bike broke down. June considered this information with the seriousness it deserved. Took a bite of sandwich. Chewed. At 6 years old, she had her mother's exact habit of saying what she thought in exactly the order she thought it, without any of the editing that came later in life. Are you lost? She said. The woman blinked, and then she laughed. Not the polished version. Not the social laugh deployed in conference rooms and fundraiser dinners. The real kind, short, caught off guard, out before she could think about it. Yeah, she said. A little. June nodded. Very serious. Like this was a reasonable answer that required a reasonable response. That's okay. Daddy was lost too after Mommy died. She took another bite. He found his way back though. He says you just have to stop driving so fast. Owen put down the wrench. June what? Not a question, she knew what. She was waiting for him to dispute it. He couldn't. It was accurate, he looked at her. It's past 9, you should be in bed. I was hungry. You had dinner at 6. I'm hungry again. She held up the empty hand where the sandwich had been as evidence of its completion. And then she looked at the woman. What's your name? A small beat. Sloane. That's pretty. June wiped her hand on her pajama pants. I'm June. That's my daddy. He's the best mechanic on Belmont Street. She said this with the settled certainty of someone presenting an established fact. He says cars are like people. They need attention to run right. Sloane looked at Owen. Owen looked at the engine. I'll be upstairs, June announced. Then she walked back through the door in her mismatched socks. They heard the stairs. Slow then faster, the small sound of her door. Quiet. She's not wrong, Sloane said. About the driving too fast thing. He didn't answer right away, just worked. Let the words sit where she'd put them then. She usually isn't. The rain eased around 11. Owen went out and brought the Harley into the garage, started on the fuel line. Sloane sat on the wooden stool near the workbench and watched him the way he'd seen people watch surgeons, not understanding the specifics, just trusting the hands. After a while she said, How long have you had this place? 6 years. Bought it from the man who ran it before. You're from Portland? No. Came up from Eugene. My wife liked Portland better. He set down one tool, picked up another. So we came to Portland. She let that sentence end where it ended. Didn't push past it. Didn't ask where the wife was now. He noticed that too. You ride much? He said. Not really. I bought the bike for my birthday 3 years ago and then never quite found the time. What do you do? A pause, not long, but real. Computers, she said. Software, something like that. He glanced up. She was looking at her hands, turning them over once, the hands of someone who worked hard but not with tools. The particular tiredness of a person who had been keeping many things in the air for a very long time. He went back to the line. At some point, without planning to, he said, You eaten today? She thought about it. Actually, thought about it, like she wasn't sure. Not since then. I've got spaghetti from dinner. June made the sauce. He looked up briefly. She mostly stirred it, but she's very proud of the stirring. Sloane looked at him like she was waiting for some catch to reveal itself. There wasn't one. Yeah, she said. Okay. He finished the line, washed his hands at the utility sink, and went to the kitchen. She followed. He heard her footsteps stop for a moment in the doorway. The kitchen was yellow and warm and smelled like garlic, and the dish soap Becca had always bought, the blue kind, because June liked the color of the bottle. June was already back at the table. She hadn't been asleep. Anyone who thought otherwise was not paying attention to June. She sat with her arms crossed, and the expression of someone who had not been found out because there was nothing to find out. Sloane sat across from her. Owen heated the food, put it on the table, sat down. June looked at Sloane. Do you have kids? She said. No, do you want them? June. It's a normal question, Daddy. Sloane smiled. The second real one, quieter than the laugh. I haven't thought about it much, she said. You should think about it, June said, with the authority of someone who had strong opinions on most subjects. Kids are good, most of them. What about the ones who aren't? June considered. They usually just need someone to be patient with them. She twirled pasta on her fork. That's what Daddy says. Owen kept his eyes on his plate. Your daddy says a lot of things, Sloane said. He doesn't say them to everyone. June looked at him. He's usually quiet. He only talks when it matters. He stood up to get water from the tap, mostly because he needed a reason to turn around for a moment. They ate. June talked about a girl at school named Penny, who was her best friend except on Tuesdays, for reasons that were complicated and had something to do with a pencil case. She talked about the neighbor's cat she'd named Gerald without anyone's knowledge or permission. She talked about wanting to be a veterinarian, and possibly also an astronaut, and she didn't see why those two things had to be separate. Sloane listened. Not the polite kind of listening where you wait for your turn. She listened like she was genuinely surprised by what came next. Like each thing June said was worth paying attention to. After a while, June set her fork down, looked at Sloane with the focused seriousness she got when she was sorting something out. Are you going to be here tomorrow? She said. Sloane opened her mouth, stopped. I don't know, she said. June thought about this the way she thought about things that deserved real consideration. Okay. She picked up her fork. You can decide in the morning. Owen walked June upstairs after dinner, came back down to find Sloane still at the table, both hands around an empty water glass. He went back to the garage to check the line one more time, came out with his hands clean. Should be good, he said. Keep it running this time. Don't let it sit. I won't. She handed him $50. He folded it and put it in his shirt pocket without looking at it. She stood in the garage doorway. He waited. Is there a motel nearby? She said. Somewhere reasonable. 2 blocks east. Belmont Inn. It's clean. She nodded, started zipping her jacket, stopped, turned back. Is it all right if I come by tomorrow? Just to make sure it's running right. Owen looked at her. She was looking at the floor, which meant it wasn't about the bike, and they both understood that, and neither of them was going to say so. Shop opens at 8, he said. She nodded once, quick, like she was filing it away before she could change her mind. Then she walked out into Portland. He heard the Harley start up, steady and clean. He watched the single headlight move down Belmont Street and turn east. Then quiet. He stood in the empty garage, looked at the stool where she'd sat, looked at June's 6-wheeled race car on the wall. He went upstairs, checked on June, who was asleep, properly this time, 1 sock on and 1 sock off. He went to his room. Sat on the edge of the bed, opened the nightstand drawer, took out the photograph. Becca, the day they signed the papers on the garage. Arms spread wide like she was about to take off, laughing at something he'd said. He couldn't remember what. Sun behind her, and her eyes squinting, and her looking exactly like herself. He looked at the photograph for a while, then said quietly to no one, Something happened tonight, I don't know what it is yet. He put the photograph back. Turned off the light. 2 blocks east in room 7 of the Belmont Inn. A woman he'd known for 3 hours rubs was lying on a comforter looking at a water stain on the ceiling that looked, if you tilted your head, like the state of Ohio. He didn't know that, but he thought she probably wasn't sleeping. He was right. Sloane lay on top of the covers with her phone plugged into a charger she'd borrowed from the night manager, who had offered it before she finished asking. The phone was charging. She hadn't turned it on. She thought about the ring on the restaurant table, thought about Garrett, who knew her company's quarterly revenue to 2 decimal places, and did not know what color she found beautiful. She thought about Greg, who would have 14 messages waiting when she powered up. She thought about the contract with its yellow tabs, patient on her desk. She thought about a kitchen the color of something someone loved enough to choose carefully. About a 6-year-old in mismatched socks who said, he only talks when it matters. About a man who looked at her when she spoke, and did not calculate anything at all. She thought about the question she still hadn't answered. Why would you pay more than the job's worth? She turned it over and over. She had built an entire company on the principle that value was established by what someone was willing to give. She had been willing to give everything for years. She still didn't have an answer. She put the phone face down and closed her eyes. The answer was 2 blocks west. She didn't know that yet either. But she knew she was going back in the morning. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like enough to go on. She came back at 8:03. Owen was under the hood of a Ford pickup when he heard the bell. He finished what he was doing. Set bench down, straightened up. She was standing just inside the door. Different jacket, same boots, hair dry this time. She was holding 2 cups from the bakery next door, and she had the expression of someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say and forgotten it on the walk over. Dots, she said, held out a cup. The woman at the counter said, "You take it black." Owen looked at the cup, then at her. "Dot told you that?" Before I finished asking. "Dot tells everyone everything. I noticed." He took the cup, drank, she drank. The Ford sat between them with its hood open. "Bike running okay?" he said. "Fine, good." He went back to the Ford. She stayed where she was, looking around the garage the way she had the night before. Taking stock. The tools on the pegboard arranged by type and size. The letters tacked near the door, some of them going back years, corners curled. June's race car drawing with its 6 wheels, and the careful block letters underneath that said fast. "She give every car 6 wheels?" Sloan said. "Only the fast ones. Can I watch what you're doing?" He looked at her over the hood. "Pull up the stool." She did. She watched him work for 2 hours without saying much. Most people who claimed they wanted to watch lasted 15 minutes before the phone came out, or they found somewhere else to be. She sat on the stool with her coffee going cold and her eyes following his hands from one task to the next. He talked sometimes. Not because she asked. Just because the quiet had a shape to it and words filled it without breaking anything. "Fuel injector," he said at one point. Held it up so she could see. "Clogged. Same problem as your bike, different location. Everything gets clogged eventually." "Pretty much. Is it always fixable?" He thought about it honestly. "Usually. You just have to catch it before it goes too long." She looked at the injector in his hand. He looked at her, looking at it. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, which was fine. Some things didn't need to be spoken to be understood. June came down at 8:30 for school. Saw Sloan on the stool, stopped in the doorway, blinked twice. "You came back," she said. "I said I might. You said you didn't know. I didn't know. Then I decided." June considered this. Nodded once. Acceptable. She went to the kitchen and returned with her backpack half-zipped and a piece of toast in her free hand. She stood beside Sloan and looked at the Ford with the serious attention she gave most things. "What's wrong with it?" "Fuel injector," Sloan said. June looked at Owen. He shrugged. She'd gotten it right. "Daddy's real good at fuel injectors," June said. Confiding. Like insider information. He's also good at transmissions. And he makes good pancakes if you don't mind them being crooked. "I don't mind crooked," Sloan said. June looked at her with complete seriousness. "Good. Because they're always going to be crooked." Owen picked June's backpack off the floor, zipped it the rest of the way, set it on her shoulders. She buckled the straps with the quick efficiency of someone who had a system. "School," he said. "I know. 10 minutes. "I know, Daddy." She looked at Sloan. "Will you be here when I get back?" Sloan opened her mouth. "She doesn't know yet," Owen said. "She'll decide when she decides." June accepted this with a gravity that belonged on a much older face. "Okay." She headed for the door, stopped, turned back. "Gerald was on the windowsill again last night, I know. We should probably just get a cat." "Probably not." She left. The bell clanged. Owen heard her feet on the sidewalk, quick, then gone. He went back to the Ford. Sloan sat back on the stool. Neither of them mentioned that she'd just implied she might still be there at 3:15. She was. And the day after that. And the day after that. By the third morning, Dot didn't wait for Sloan to come in and ask. She just had 2 cups ready when the door opened, set them on the counter without a word and pushed them across. Sloan stood there for a second. "How did you know what I take?" Dot looked at her over the top of her reading glasses. She was 62 years old and had been watching people come and go on Belmont Street since before the coffee shop on the corner existed, before the vintage store, before most of the things that were there now. She had opinions about most of it. "Honey," she said, "I've been watching people order for 30 years. You're a splash of cream, no sugar, lid, because you're always on your way somewhere even when you're staying put. Sloane did not know what to do with that. She took the cups and went. Sloane asked about the tire pressure gauge on Tuesday. Owen showed her. Stood beside her while she knelt down next to the front tire of the Ford. She got her knee on the concrete without being told, without looking for something cleaner to kneel on. Applied the gauge correctly on the first try. Read the number. 34, she said. Should be 32, 2 pounds off. Is that serious? Not catastrophic. But you feel it. Handling gets stiff. Where's the center tread faster than the edges? He crouched beside her. Too much pressure doesn't mean better. It just feels like it does. She looked at the gauge in her hand. Turned it over once. I've been running at 34 for a while, she said. He didn't pretend she was talking about tires. I know, he said. She let a little air out, checked again. 32, there, Owen said. She looked at the tire for a moment. Then at him. They were close this way, both crouched down, at the same level for once. Does it always this simple to fix? She said. The simple ones are. It's the ones that look simple that get you. She stood, handed the gauge back. He hung it on its peg. Later that afternoon, Mr. Patterson came in. 73 years old. He drove a 2003 Buick he'd had since his wife was alive and brought it in every 3 weeks whether or not anything was wrong. Usually nothing was wrong. Owen checked it anyway and charged him for the oil change and nothing more. Mr. Patterson settled into the plastic chair by the door like a man who had a regular seat. He was a talker, had been a mail carrier for 31 years and knew every street in the northeast quadrant of Portland by name, by front porch, by the particular habits of the people who lived there. Sloane had been about to leave. She stayed. She sat on the stool and listened to Mr. Patterson talk about his route. About a woman on Laurel who used to leave water out for carriers in the summer. About a boy on Davis who ran out to the mailbox every Thursday like he was expecting something urgent. Was he? Sloane said, expecting something. Mr. Patterson looked at his hands folded in his lap. Boy's dad was deployed. Letter came every 2 weeks. Thursday mornings regular. Did they always come? Until they didn't. He looked up. Boy was 11. That was a hard Thursday. The garage went quiet except for the sound of Owen working in the back. Mr. Patterson looked at Sloane with the calm attention of someone who had been paying attention to people for a long time. You work with computers, he said. Not a question. She'd mentioned it in passing earlier. Yes. Important work? It pays well. That's not what I asked. She looked at him. I'm still working that out, she said. He nodded once. Like that was the right answer. Like the working out part was the point. Owen came around from the back, wiping his hands. Looked at the two of them. Didn't say anything. Got the oil started on the Buick. Mr. Patterson watched him work and then looked at Sloane again. Haven't seen him take on a student before, he said. Quiet, not quite to her, just observation. I'm not a student, Sloane said. No, Mr. Patterson agreed pleasantly. I suppose not. He paid when the oil change was done, folded the receipt into his wallet with the careful habit of a man who kept records of small things. At the door he stopped. You staying on in Portland? She looked at him. I don't know yet, he smiled. That's usually a yes. The bell clanged behind him. Owen stood at the workbench, not looking up. He's not wrong either, Sloane said. People on this street usually aren't, Owen said. Gets annoying after a while. She laughed, a real one. He kept his eyes on the workbench. But he was smiling. June set up the kitchen table like she was running a professional institution. Paper on both sides. Colored pencils in a cup in the center, organized by color family, because June had opinions about organization that she had developed independently and enforced strictly. She assigned Sloane the blue pencil. She took the red. She explained the rules before anything else, because rules mattered and needed to be stated clearly. 1. Draw something real, not imaginary. 2. It didn't have to look like the thing. 3. No erasing. Whatever went down stayed down. Sloane looked at the blank paper. Those are frightening rules, she said. I know. June picked up her pencil. That's the whole point. Sloane drew something. She wasn't sure what it was while she was making it. Lines. A shape. Something like a building and something like a road and somewhere in between them, something like a person. She sat back and looked at it when she was done. June leaned over, studied it with her head at an angle, the way she studied most things. It doesn't have to look like anything, June said. It just has to feel like something. Sloane looked at the drawing again. It felt like everything she didn't have words for yet. She folded the paper carefully when June moved on to her own drawing. Put it in her jacket pocket. She wasn't entirely sure why. She just wasn't ready to leave it on the table. Owen came in from the back while they were still drawing. He'd been working on a carburetor, and his hands were clean from the sink, but his forearms were not. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Just a moment. June explaining the difference between warm and cool colors with the confidence of someone presenting to a board of directors. Sloane listening with the same attention she'd give a quarterly report. Both of them at the kitchen table under the yellow light. He'd forgotten what that looked like. A kitchen with 2 people in it. He went to pour coffee, kept his back turned a little longer than necessary. Daddy, yeah. Sloane didn't know orange is warm. Most people don't start out knowing that. She thought it was cold. Because of pumpkins. Pumpkins are fall, Sloane said. Fall is warm colors, June said, patient but firm. Because the trees go red and orange and yellow right before they lose everything. She said it simply. The way she said enormous things, like their weight was just a fact of the world. They put on their best right before they let go. Sloane looked at Owen. He was looking at his coffee cup. She's right, he said. Sloane said quietly. She is. That evening after June went upstairs, Owen told her about Becca. Not on purpose. Not as a prepared thing. It came the way real things came, sideways, through a gap he hadn't planned to leave open. He was showing Sloane how to check oil. They were standing side by side at the hood of the Ford, closer than strictly necessary. But the work light hung toward the center, and the light was better there. He pulled the dipstick, wiped it, reinserted it, pulled it again. You check it twice, she said. First pull shows you where the oil is right now. Second pull shows you the real level after it settles back. He held the stick so she could see the line. This is fine, but I like to know for certain. Check twice before you trust what you see, she said. Something like that. June appeared from the back room with a permission slip for a field trip. She handed it to Owen. He read it and signed and handed it back. She looked at Sloane. Did you know my mommy loved cars? June said. Sloane shook her head. She didn't know anything about how they worked. But she loved them. She said they looked like they were going somewhere even when they were standing still. June looked at the Ford. Daddy says that's why he liked her, because she saw things differently. Owen put the dipstick back, closed the hood, picked up a clean rag and stood holding it. She was a nurse, he said, not directed at anyone. Just into the air of the garage, because it needed to be said. Worked nights. I worked days. We barely overlapped the first 2 years we were together. He folded the rag, refolded it. She said that was fine. She said she knew where I was. She said some people spend their whole lives looking for someone who stays put, and she was glad she found hers early. The garage was quiet except for the rain starting up again outside. Light this time, the Portland kind. She sounds like someone worth staying put for, Sloane said. She was. June had gone back to her room by then. She'd delivered what needed delivering and moved on, the way she did. Because to June, grief didn't need ceremony. It just needed to be said sometimes, out loud in an ordinary room, and then the evening continued. Owen finally set the rag down. She died 2 years ago in March, he said, 29 years old. He looked at the workbench, then at Sloane. June was 4. She remembers her, but not the way she'll wish she did when she's older. Sloane didn't say she was sorry. Didn't say it wasn't fair, or that at least they'd had their time, or any of the other things people reached for. She said, what did her laugh sound like? Owen looked at her, like something caught her off guard, he said. Every single time. Even if she'd heard the joke before, she couldn't fake it. She tried to be cool about things and just couldn't manage it. I like that, yeah. He picked up the wrench he'd set down earlier. Me too. On Friday afternoon, Greg called. Sloane was sitting on the stool. Owen was in the back working on a Subaru. June was at the kitchen table doing homework and periodically announcing answers out loud to no one in particular. The phone rang. Sloane looked at the screen, frowned once, answered Greg. Owen kept working, not listening on purpose. But the garage was small and voices carried. Greg's voice came through tight and controlled. Trying to stay calm, the board wanted to meet. A company called Donnelly Capital had been quietly buying shares for 3 weeks. If Sloane wasn't back in Seattle by Tuesday, the position could shift in ways that would be difficult to recover from. I heard you, Sloane said. This is serious. I said I heard you. She hung up the garage, went quiet. Owen straightened up from under the Subaru, looked at her. She was sitting very still, phone in her hand, screen already dark, looking at the middle distance between herself and the car. "You should go," he said. "I know." He looked at her, at the phone, at the way her hands were around it. "How bad?" he said. She looked up, and then she told him, not the polished version, not the version she'd give on a call or in a press statement. The real one. About Donnelly Capital and what they were doing and why it mattered. About the board and the 11 people who depended on her being in the room. About the contract on her desk that she'd been circling for 11 days. About Garrett and the ring and the restaurant, and the fact that she'd ridden a motorcycle south from Seattle without a bag or a plan or even a charged phone. About the boardroom 6 weeks before she arrived in Portland. The panic that came up from nowhere in the middle of a presentation. 11 people in the room. She'd pretended she was choking on water. "Did it work?" Owen said. No one asked. "That was the part I couldn't get past. Not the panic attack, that no one thought to ask. What did you do after?" "Went to my car. Sat there an hour. Then went back in and signed another contract." Owen was quiet for a moment. He set his wrench down on the edge of the Subaru. "That's not strength," he said. "That's just surviving. There's a difference." She looked at him. "Surviving is what you do when you have no other choice," he said. "Strength is what you do when you do have one." She sat with that. He picked the wrench back up. "Open the laptop," he said. "What? You said you can work from anywhere." "Hood's flat. Plenty of space." She stared at him. "Owen, Donnelly Capital is betting you'll run, so don't run. Handle it from here." He went back under the hood. "Then you didn't leave and you didn't hide. You just worked." She sat there for a long moment. Then she opened her bag, pulled out the laptop, set it on the hood of the Subaru. Called Greg back. What happened in the next hour was something Owen would think about for a long time after. Because she changed. Not into someone different, into more of herself. She stood up from the stool and paced the garage once, twice, phone against her ear, laptop open on the hood, talking in a language of numbers and strategy that meant nothing to him but had the same diagnostic logic he used on engines. Find the actual problem, address that, not the symptoms. June appeared in the doorway, saw Sloane moving through the garage mid-sentence, one hand gesturing as she talked. Looked at Owen. He shook his head slightly. June nodded and went back to homework. When the call ended, Sloane stood in the center of the garage. Laptop on her forearm, typing one last thing. Then she lowered it. Looked at Owen. She had motor oil on the edge of her sleeve from where she'd leaned against the car. Hair had come half loose. She was standing in a mechanic's garage in Portland, and she looked more herself than she had since she'd walked through the door. "Donnelly's going to back off," she said. "They were counting on the uncertainty. I removed it. That fast? When you know where the problem actually is, the fix doesn't take long." He almost smiled. "You sound like a mechanic," he said. She looked around the garage, the tools, the letters, the amber work light. June's drawing. The stool she'd been sitting on for 5 days. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me to stay. You would have figured it out. I would have gotten on the bike and driven to Seattle, probably." Which is exactly what they wanted, yeah. She put the laptop away, sat back on the stool. The work continued. The afternoon went on. Mr. Patterson stopped by unexpectedly, and Sloane changed his oil herself while Owen worked on a different car in the back. Mr. Patterson sat in the plastic chair and told a story about a family on Morrison who'd once left him a Christmas card every year for 22 years, and then moved without a forwarding address. "Do you wonder about them?" Sloane said from under the hood. "Every December," he said. "That's the thing about caring about people. It doesn't stop when they go." Owen heard that from the back, didn't say anything, just kept working. That evening, after Mr. Patterson left and June was in bed, Owen got 2 sodas from the kitchen and they went out to the small backyard. 2 chairs, a patch of grass, a bird feeder that had been empty for months. Owen hadn't filled it since the previous winter. He'd meant to and kept not getting around to it. Portland sky doing what it did in October. Low clouds with gaps. The occasional star when the gaps lined up right. They sat for a while. Then Owen said, "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him. He was looking at the empty feeder. "Second day you were here," he said. "I was putting things away in the break room. There was a business magazine on the table, 3 months old." He looked at her. "Your picture was on the cover." The silence that followed was a different kind than the ones before it. Sloane went still. "You knew," she said, "since the second morning. Why didn't you say anything?" He turned the soda bottle in his hands. "Because you came in here looking like someone who needed to be nobody for a while." He set the bottle on the arm of the chair. "Figured that was worth more than me knowing your name." She sat with that, turned it over slowly. "Most people would have treated me differently," she said. "I know. You didn't, I know." She looked at him. "Was any of it real? The way you were with me? Was that all of it?" He said it without hesitation and without elaboration. "That's just how I am," she believed him. That was the part that undid something in her chest she'd been holding tight for a long time. Because she'd been waiting for the catch, the angle, the thing people always wanted when they found out who she was. There was always something. There was nothing here. Just a man who'd seen her face in a magazine and handed her a cup of coffee and asked if she wanted to watch him work. Because that was just how he was. She looked out at the dark yard, at the empty feeder, at the clouds moving across the gap in the sky. "I had a panic attack in the boardroom," she said, 6 weeks before I came here in front of 11 people. I pretended I was choking. "I know you told me, I know I told you." She paused. "I've never told anyone else." He didn't say anything, just sat there. "I built something enormous," she said, "and I don't remember what I built it for." "Yes, you do," he said. "You just got too far from it to see it clearly." She looked at him. "You said you wanted to make software that helped people," he said. "You said that at dinner, when June asked what you did. You said something like games and computers, and then you laughed because you'd never said it that simply." He looked at the feeder. "That's what you built it for. You just ended up too high up in the building to remember the ground floor." She was quiet for a long time. "June's going to be sad when I leave," she said. "I know. She doesn't get attached easily." "No," a pause. "Neither do I. Not anymore." He said it quietly, looking at the yard. And then neither of them said anything else for a while. Just sat in the cool October night while the clouds shifted, and the stars came in and out, and the empty bird feeder swayed slightly in a wind neither of them could feel from where they were sitting. Sunday morning, Sloane called her mother. She'd been awake since 5, lying in room 7 at the Belmont Inn, looking at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like Ohio if you tilted your head. The phone had been charged since Friday. She'd been not turning it on in a deliberate way. She turned it on. 14 messages from Greg, all handled now. 3 from Garrett. 1 voicemail from her mother, Ruth Whitfield, calling from Montana at 7:30 on a Sunday morning the way she always had, every week since Sloane left for college. She pressed play, her mother's voice unhurried, a little rough at the edges the way it had always been. "Just checking in, Claire Bear. Haven't heard from you, I hope you're somewhere good. Call me when you can. Love you, Claire," her middle name. The name her mother used at home when there was no one else around. Sloane hadn't heard it in years. She sat up in the motel bed and pressed call back. "Hi, Mom," there she is, warm, unchanged. "Where are you, honey?" "Portland, Oregon." "What's in Portland?" Sloane looked out the window, past the parking lot, down the street. The corner where she could just make out the edge of the sign, Callaway's Auto. "I'm not completely sure yet," she said. "But I think I'm starting to understand." Her mother didn't ask for more, just said, "Good, that's good, Claire Bear." Sloane was at the garage by 8:15, Dot's cups in hand. Owen was already under a hood. He looked up. She held out his cup. He took it. Neither of them said anything about the night before, about the empty feeder and the things said and not said in the dark yard. Some things didn't need to be discussed. They just needed to be continued. June came down at 8:30, saw Sloane. Didn't comment on it. Just pulled up a chair and started drawing without being asked, like Sloane had always been there, like this was simply how Sunday mornings were. The day went on the way days did on Belmont Street. Mr. Patterson stopped by even though he'd been in just 2 days before, claiming he'd heard a sound. Owen checked and found nothing, and charged him nothing. Dot brought over a cinnamon roll she said was a mistake, but that she'd made on purpose and didn't want to admit it. A woman named Carol brought in her teenage son's first car, a 1998 Honda that needed more work than it was worth, and Owen told her honestly and then helped her figure out what to fix first. Sloane watched all of it. At one point she was helping Owen hold a part in place while he secured it, both of them leaning over the same engine, arms occasionally touching, and she thought, I have been in rooms with presidents of companies. I have negotiated contracts worth more than this street will ever see. And I have never in my life felt more useful than I do right now holding this piece of metal steady. She didn't say that out loud. But she thought Owen might have understood it anyway, because when he was done, he said thank you in the same tone he used when he meant it, and went on to the next thing. That afternoon June rode her bike in the small yard behind the garage. She did this most afternoons. The yard was just big enough. A red bike she'd outgrown technically but hadn't emotionally. With training wheels she'd stopped needing but hadn't agreed to remove. She rode in slow, careful loops while Owen worked, and Sloane sat in the doorway with her coffee, and the late October sun came through the gap in the fence. Then the sound of something going wrong, which is different from other sounds. You know it before you understand it. Your body understands first the crash, then silence, no cry, no call for help, just silence. Owen was out the back door before Sloane had fully processed what she'd heard. She was up and through the doorway in 3 seconds, maybe 4. June was on the ground, bike on its side beside her. Still, Owen was already down on his knees, hands careful, voice low and steady, her name over and over, quiet and controlled. His hands moving to check her neck, her head, her breathing. She was breathing, but she wasn't waking up. Sloane stood 2 feet away for 1 second, 1 second. Then she moved. She called 911, gave the address clearly. Told them June's age and what had happened and that she was unconscious and breathing. Went back inside for Owen's keys without being asked. Pulled his car around to the back gate. 11 minutes to Providence Medical Center. She drove and did not think about anything except the road and the turns in 11 minutes. 10, 9. Owen sat in the back with June's head in his lap, talking to her, steady, quiet. The voice of a man who had already lost one person and was refusing with everything in him to lose another. Sloane drove. At the hospital she pulled up to the emergency entrance and Owen carried June in, and then things moved the way things moved in hospitals, fast and purposeful and completely out of anyone's hands. The waiting room was white, plastic chairs along the walls, a television mounted in the corner with the sound off. Owen sat down in a chair and looked at nothing. Sloane sat next to him. She didn't touch his arm. Didn't say she was certain June would be fine. Didn't reach for any of the words people reached for. She just sat there. Right beside him, present. Dot arrived 40 minutes later. She'd seen the car missing and the back gate open and figured it out. She came in with a paper bag, set it on the table between the chairs without a word, and sat down across from them. 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches. She didn't say a thing. She was 62 years old and she knew when talking helped and when it didn't. The doctor came out at 7:42, Dr. Hargrove. Calm in the particular way that came from years of delivering both kinds of news. She looked at Owen directly, head injury. They were running scans. June was stable. There was some swelling and they wanted to monitor it closely. If the swelling increased overnight, a procedure might be necessary. She would come back with more information after the next scan. Then she was gone. Owen sat with that. After a moment he said quietly to no one, "Insurance, I should call the insurance company. The premium changed in September and I need to check the coverage on." Owen, he stopped. Sloane had her phone in her hand. He put his hand over hers. "Don't," he said, "she needs the best care available. I know what she needs." His voice was very low. Becca was in a good room at the end. The best equipment, nurses who came every 20 minutes. He looked at the floor. She died anyway. And the room didn't matter. Nothing about the room mattered. He looked up. "I don't want June growing up thinking every hard thing has a checkbook behind it. That's not who I want her to be. That's not what Becca would have wanted." Sloane sat with that. She didn't argue it. After a long moment she said, "Then let me be a friend. Not a checkbook. Friends help each other when it matters. That's all this is. That's all I'm saying it is." Owen looked at the wall, at his hands, at the door the doctor had come through. He thought about June on her bike in the afternoon sun. About mismatched socks and the 6-wheeled race car and the voice that said, "It doesn't have to look like anything. It just has to feel like something." He thought about what it meant to let someone in. Not because you were weak, but because you trusted them enough to try. He looked at Sloane. She looked back. "Okay," he said, "just a friend." She made the call. Her voice was quiet and clear. She arranged for the best neurology team available, And she did it without making it a performance, and when she was done, she put the phone in her pocket and sat back in the plastic chair. Owen sat beside her and said nothing. They ate the sandwiches Dot had brought, one each. Neither of them acknowledged the specific way they divided them without discussing it. At midnight, a nurse came and told them June was resting, stable through the evening. The next scan was scheduled for early morning. Owen stood, sat back down. "Go home," Sloane said. "Sleep a few hours. I'll stay." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He looked at her for a long moment. The same way he always looked at something he needed to be sure of. Checking twice. "I'll call you the second anything changes," she said. "You have my word." He stood, looked at her once more. "Thank you," he said. She shook her head slightly, like thanks was the wrong currency for this, like they were past that now. He left. Sloane sat alone in the white room. She reached into her jacket pocket, took out the folded piece of paper. The drawing from June's kitchen table 4 days ago. She unfolded it carefully, lines and shapes, something like a building and a road and a person in the middle of both. She held it in both hands. She thought about a 6-year-old who said, "You just have to stop driving so fast." She thought about a man who checked things twice before trusting what he saw. She thought about a kitchen the color of a choice someone made carefully. She folded the paper, held it, and waited for morning. The hospital at night had a sound all its own. Not quiet, not loud. Somewhere between, the low hum of the building running, footsteps in distant corridors, a door opening and closing somewhere on another floor, the soft regular beep of machines behind closed doors. Sloane sat in the plastic chair and did not sleep. She'd tried. Around 2, she'd leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes and listened to all of it. The building breathing, the nurses moving past at intervals, the distant sound of someone's television through a wall. She did not sleep. She held June's drawing in both hands, unfolded it, looked at it, folded it again. Lines and shapes that didn't have to look like anything, just had to feel like something. At 3:15, a nurse came through to check. Young woman, steady eyes. She told Sloane that June was resting well. Swelling looked stable. Doctor would be in early. Sloane nodded and said, "Thank you," and the nurse looked at her with the expression nurses had for people keeping vigil. A recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of what it meant to stay. "You family?" the nurse said. Sloane opened her mouth and stopped. "Yes," she said. The nurse nodded and went back down the hall. Sloane sat with that word. Yes, she turned it over the way she'd turned over the pressure gauge, the way she'd turned over Owen's question about paying more than something was worth. She held it up to the light and looked at it from different angles. Yes, she was still sitting with it when Owen came back at 6:40. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Same clothes, hair not fully combed. 2 cups from Dot's in his hands because Dot opened at 6 and she'd seen him coming from the window and had the cups ready before he reached the door. He stopped when he saw Sloane standing up from the chair. They looked at each other across the waiting room. He handed her a cup. She took it. Their fingers overlapped for a second on the cardboard sleeve. "Any news?" he said. "Stable all night. Doctor's due soon." He nodded. Sat down in the chair she'd vacated. She sat in the one beside it. Close, their shoulders almost touching. Neither moved apart. They drank their coffee. Dot came in at 6:55 with a paper bag she set on the table without a word. 2 breakfast sandwiches. She looked at both of them, looked at the door to the treatment area, and went back out to open her shop. 62 years old, and she knew when to stay and when to go. The doctor came at 7:20, Dr. Hargrove. Same composed manner as the night before. She looked at Owen when she spoke. "The swelling has decreased overnight, significantly. That's a strong indicator." She paused. "June is responding well. We want to keep her through today and run one more scan this afternoon. But based on what we're seeing this morning," she held Owen's eyes, "I'm cautiously optimistic." Owen sat back down. Straight down. Like his legs made the decision independently. Sloane put her hand on his arm. She kept it there. His jaw worked, holding something in. The way a person held things in when they'd been holding them so long that letting go felt like a different kind of danger. "Can I see her?" he said. "Give us 30 minutes to get her settled for the morning. Then yes." Dr. Hargrove went back through the door. Owen sat with his elbows on his knees and face in his hands. Not crying, just resting there, taking the 30 minutes to do what he needed to do with the information. Sloane kept her hand on his arm. After a while he lifted his head. looked at the wall across from them, then at the ceiling, then at his hands. Okay, he said, quietly, like it was directed somewhere other than the waiting room. Sloane understood. She didn't say anything. Just stayed. June was awake when the nurse brought Owen in. Sloane waited in the hallway, gave them the room. She stood near the window at the end of the corridor and looked out at Portland going about its morning. Delivery trucks. A woman walking a dog. The light, the specific gray-gold of October in the Pacific Northwest, low and soft and without any particular commitment to warmth. Through the small window in the door, she could see Owen sitting on the edge of June's bed, taking June's hand in both of his head going down, his shoulders moving once, just once, before he gathered himself back together. June reached up with her free hand and patted his head. A 6-year-old, from a hospital with a bandage around her head, patting her father's head. Sloane looked away. She looked at the linoleum floor, at the scuff marks along the baseboard, at the exit sign at the end of the hall glowing steady red. She was not going to cry in a hospital corridor. She cried in a hospital corridor. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Looked up, breathed, looked back at the door. Owen was coming out. He stopped when he saw her face, looked at her. Did not make a thing of it. She's asking for you, he said. Sloane blinked. Me? You, the corner of his mouth moved. Just slightly. She said to tell you Gerald is probably at the window and someone needs to handle it. Sloane laughed. Shaky reel. She went in. June was smaller in the bed than she was anywhere else. That was the first thing. In the garage, she was enormous. All certainty and motion and opinions about the correct taxonomy of color. Here she was a small person in a large bed with a white bandage and eyes that were sharper than they had any right to be given the night she'd had. Sloane sat in the chair beside the bed. June looked at her. You stayed, June said. All night. You slept in that chair? I didn't sleep. June frowned, disapproving. You should sleep. I know, you look tired. I know that too. June was quiet for a moment, looking at the ceiling the way she looked at things when she was sorting them out. I'm sorry I scared you, she said. You didn't scare me, Sloane said. Daddy's eyes were scared. Yours too. Sloane looked at her hands in her lap. Maybe a little. That means you care, June said. Simple, factual. People only get scared for people they care about. Sloane looked at this child. This precise, enormous-hearted, absolutely certain child who had walked into a garage 9 days ago and asked a stranger if she was lost. Like the answer didn't change anything, like lost was just a place you were until you weren't anymore. June, she said. Yeah, I drew something at your kitchen table. A few days ago, you told me it didn't have to look like anything. Yeah, I kept it. Sloane reached into her jacket pocket, took out the folded paper, unfolded it carefully. Held it so June could see. June tilted her head, the way she always did when assessing something that deserved real attention. It looks like you, June said. Sloane looked at the drawing. The person in the middle, June said, pointing with one careful finger. Between the building and the road. That's you. She lowered her hand. You drew yourself finding the way. Sloane sat with that for a long time. Then, June, I need to ask you something. Okay, would it bother you if I stayed in Portland for a while? June looked at her with full seriousness. How long is a while? I don't know exactly. Longer than a week? Yes, probably a lot longer. June thought about this with the gravity it deserved. She looked at the ceiling. Back at Sloane. At the drawing still in Sloane's hand. You'd have to learn to make better pancakes, she said. I know. Daddy's are crooked, but yours would probably be worse at first. Almost definitely. And Gerald can't come inside. She said this firmly. That's Daddy's rule, and it's a good one. That's a completely reasonable rule. June nodded once. Like the terms had been stated and accepted. Okay, she said. You can stay. She closed her eyes, already heading back towards sleep. 6 years old and recovering from a head injury, and she'd just negotiated the terms of a woman's entire future with the same energy she used to organize colored pencils. I'm going to sleep now, June murmured. Tell Daddy to stop standing so still in the hallway. It's worse than pacing. Sloane stood, folded the drawing, put it back in her pocket. Okay, she said. I'll tell him. She turned off the overhead light on her way out. Left just the small lamp above the bed. Pulled the door closed soft behind her. Owen was in the hallway. Not pacing. Standing completely still, which June had correctly identified as worse. She's sleeping, Sloane said. He let out a breath. She said to stop standing so still. He looked at the closed door, then at Sloane. She's all right, Sloane said. Yeah? he said it quietly. She's all right. They walked back to the waiting room together. He picked up his coffee from the table, drank what was left of it, cold by now. He drank it anyway. The second scan is this afternoon, Sloane said. Dr. Hargrove said she'd have results by 3. He nodded. They sat down and waited. The second scan came back at 3:14. Dr. Hargrove came through the door and Owen stood up before she reached them. Sloane stood beside him. Normal. The scan was completely unremarkably, beautifully normal. Swelling had resolved. No procedure needed. June could go home the following morning provided she rested overnight and the morning check was clear. Owen sat back down, stood back up, put one hand on the back of the plastic chair. Sloane watched him take it in. Watched the particular way a person absorbed good news after bracing themselves against the worst for 18 hours. It didn't arrive cleanly. It came in pieces. Dr. Hargrove said a few more things about rest and follow-up and watching for certain symptoms over the next 2 weeks. Owen nodded through all of it. When the doctor left, he took out his phone and called Dot. Sloane heard Dot's voice from where she stood. Not the words, just the pitch. Warm, relieved, a little loud because Dot was always a little loud when something mattered. Owen listened, then said, "Yeah, she's good, she's real good." He hung up, looked at Sloane. "Dot's making a pie," he said. "What kind?" She didn't say. With Dot it could be anything. I'm good with anything. He looked at her. "Yeah. I know." They went back to June's room. She was awake and had been told the news and was processing it in her characteristically practical way, which meant she'd already moved on to asking when she could go back to school and whether the field trip she'd signed the permission slip for was still happening. Owen sat on the edge of her bed. Sloane sat in the chair. The afternoon light came through the window at an angle, low and amber, the way October light came in the last hour before evening. June looked at both of them. "Are you two going to be weird about this?" she said. "About what?" Owen said. "About me falling. People always get weird after something happens. They hover." She said the word like it was a specific and unpleasant condition. "I don't want hovering. I'm not going to hover," Owen said. June looked at Sloane. "I make no promises," Sloane said. June considered this. "Okay, that's honest." She seemed to find honesty an acceptable substitute for the promise. "Is Gerald going to be on the window when we get home?" "Probably," Owen said. "We should really just get a cat." "We're not getting a cat, June. The hovering would be easier to take if there was a cat." Owen looked at the ceiling. Sloane looked at the window. Neither of them said anything, which June correctly interpreted as the no getting softer. That evening, Owen and Sloane sat in June's room, June sleeping. Owen in the chair by the window, Sloane in the one on the other side of the bed. The room dim, just the light above the door and the soft glow of the monitors, the steady, reliable sound of the machines. They talked, not about important things, about small things. The way people talked when a crisis had passed and what was left was just the ordinary texture of being in a room with another person. He told her more about buying the garage, how Ted, the previous owner, had run it for 30 years and wanted to retire to Bend. How Owen had seen the listing when Becca was 8 months pregnant, thought it was too much money, too much risk, too much everything. How Becca had driven past it twice, stood in front of the wooden sign and said, "You're buying that." She was right, Sloane said. She was right about most things. What was she wrong about, he thought, a real pause considering. "Pancakes," he said. She said you had to wait for the edges to bubble completely. You can't. You have to check it earlier. Lift the edge and look. You have to look before you think you need to. Exactly. She never came around on that. 4 years, never. She went down believing in the bubble method, and she was wrong every time. Sloane smiled. I liked that she held the line. She was stubborn in very specific ways. He looked at June, sleeping. June got that. What did you get? He thought about it. I got that she was usually right even when she wasn't. Sloane looked at him. He was looking at June, the same expression he'd had in the garage in the early evenings. The particular steady attention of a person who understood what mattered and kept his eyes on it. "Owen," she said. "Yeah, I'm going to stay in Portland." He didn't look surprised. He also didn't jump to fill the space with a response. He sat with it the way he sat with most things, giving it the room it needed. "The company?" he said. "I'm going to promote my COO to handle operations. She's been ready for 2 years. I've just been holding on because I thought letting go meant I'd built something I wasn't needed for." She looked at her hands. But I think that's exactly what you're supposed to build. Something that can run without you gripping it constantly. And what do you do? Strategy vision. The work I'm actually good at, from here. From an apartment on Belmont Street if I can find one. He looked at June. There's one above Dot's shop, he said. She's been trying to rent it for 3 months. Nobody wants to live above a bakery because of the smell. What does it smell like? Cinnamon rolls at 5 in the morning. That sounds terrible, Sloane said. Terrible, he agreed. She looked at the window. I'll call her tomorrow. He nodded. Then, it won't be like what you're used to, I know. It's just Portland, Belmont Street, it's just. I know what it is, she said. That's the reason. He turned to look at her then, close in the dim room, the monitor beeping its steady reassurance between them. June told me I could stay, Sloane said. This afternoon, what exactly were the terms? Better pancakes, no Gerald inside. Owen looked at June sleeping, at the small rise and fall of her breathing. Those are her non-negotiables. I accepted them. All of them? She looked at him, all of them. He held her gaze for a moment, checking, the way he always checked, twice, to be sure. Then he reached over June's bed, took Sloane's hand, not a gesture, not a statement. Just his hand around hers, resting there. Both of them looking at June sleeping in the amber light. Sloane looked at their hands, then at June, then at the window where Portland was dark and steady outside the glass. And thought, yes, this, exactly this. June came home on a Wednesday morning, gray sky. The particular October overcast that couldn't commit to rain but wouldn't give it up either. Owen pulled the car to the curb in front of the garage. Sloane carried June's bag. June walked out of the hospital on her own 2 feet and stopped on the sidewalk and looked up. Breathed in. It smells different out here, she said. Always does, Sloane said. After you've been inside a while, better. Yeah. June looked at Owen, then at Sloane, then at the street stretching toward home. Can we stop at Dot's? She said. Why? Owen said. Because she made a pie and I want some. Dot's pie turned out to be apple with a lattice crust that had gone slightly crooked on the left side. June pointed this out immediately. Dot said the crust had done what it wanted, and she wasn't going to argue with pastry. June said that was a reasonable position. They ate it at the small table Dot kept near the window, and Dot did not charge Owen, and Owen did not argue because some things were not about money. The weeks after that were quiet, which was entirely the point. Sloane found the apartment above Dot's shop. She called Dot the morning after June came home, and Dot said, "Come look at it this afternoon." And Sloane looked at it that afternoon, and it was small, and had one window that stuck and smelled powerfully of cinnamon at 5 every morning, and she said she'd take it. She set up her desk by the window that didn't stick, laptop, good headphones, a coffee maker that was an improvement on the motels. She had calls with Greg at 9 every morning, strategy sessions on Tuesdays. The rest of the company ran the way a well-built thing ran when you finally trusted it to. She had not had the rest of her days before. She didn't know what to do with them at first. So she went to the garage. She told Owen she was there to learn. He put her to work. She was not good at. She handed him the wrong tool twice in one morning, a flathead when he'd said Phillips, and he looked at her with a patience that was genuine and not performed. Phillips, he said. I gave you Phillips. That's a flathead. She looked at the screwdriver. They look the same. They do not look the same. They look the same to someone who hasn't been doing this for 20 years. Then learn faster. She learned faster. By the second week, she could name most of what hung on the pegboard without prompting. By the third week, she'd changed oil twice without guidance and been corrected only once, on the torque of the drain plug, which she over-tightened by a margin Owen called aggressive. By the fourth week, Mr. Patterson came in for his regular visit, and she handled his oil change start to finish, while Owen worked on a transmission in the back. Mr. Patterson sat in the plastic chair and talked about his old route, a family on Glizzen who'd moved away 20 years ago, and whose Christmas cards he still thought about. A woman, on Halsey, who'd left a note in the mailbox once that said simply, "Thank you for being reliable." He'd kept that note. Why that one? Sloane said from under the hood. Because reliable is underrated, he said. Everybody wants exciting. Reliable is what gets you through. When the oil change was done, she showed him the dipstick the way Owen had shown her. Clean line, good level, 3,000 miles, easy. Mr. Patterson paid, stood, looked at her with the easy attention of someone who had been watching people for decades. You staying, he said. Not a question this time. Yes, she said. He nodded, put his hat on. At the door, he stopped. Good, he said, when needed someone who could stay. The bell clanged behind him. Owen appeared from the back. He'd heard. He went to the sink and washed his hands and didn't say anything, which Sloane had come to understand was not absence but presence of a different kind. She put the Phillips screwdriver on its proper peg, left side. He dried his hands, looked at the pegboard, looked at her. You're getting faster, he said. I had a good teacher. You're still too aggressive on the drain plug. I like things to hold. He looked at her, and what was on his face was not a smile exactly. It was quieter than that. The look of someone who recognized something. Yeah, he said, I know. November arrived and then settled in. June recovered fully and returned to school and resumed her campaign for a cat, with the renewed energy of someone who felt her recent medical situation had shifted the negotiating landscape in her favor. She was not wrong about that. The no was getting softer. Sloane came to the garage every afternoon. Some days she worked alongside Owen. Some days she sat on the stool and ran her own work while he ran his, both of them in the same space doing different things. The sound of the keyboard and the wrench in the same room, and it being perfectly fine. Better than fine. June sat between them at the kitchen table for homework, distributing her questions evenly, asking Owen about fractions, asking Sloane about what photosynthesis was actually for, telling them both equally about Penny's ongoing Tuesday behavior and Gerald's increasing boldness on the windowsill. Dot came over on Fridays. She didn't wait to be invited because the invitation was implied. She brought something from the shop and sat with her coffee and watched the three of them move around each other in the kitchen and said very little. One Friday in November, she caught Sloane alone in the garage while Owen was doing a pickup at the parts store. Dot leaned against the workbench. You're good at this, she said. Sloane was checking a tire. I'm still learning, not the mechanic part. Dot looked around the garage, at the thank you letters, at the six-wheeled race car, at the stool. This, being here, being a part of something. Sloane sat back on her heels. I wasn't, she said, before, I know. Dot picked up a clean rag from the bench and folded it the way Owen always did. Set it down. He hasn't been easy since Becca. He's not difficult, he's just careful. There's a difference. I know the difference. Dot looked at her. Yeah, I think you do. She picked up her coffee. June picked you out the first night. I want you to know that. She doesn't do that. She's friendly, but she doesn't pick people out. Sloane looked at the stool. She asked if I was lost, Sloane said. Were you? Yes. And now? Sloane looked around the garage. At the tools on the peg. At the floor with the oil stains that would never fully come out. At the sign through the window faded at one edge, still perfectly readable. No, she said. Not anymore. Dot nodded, took her coffee and went back to her shop. The weeks continued. Ordinary in the way that good things were ordinary. Owen fixed cars. Sloane helped and learned and ran her company from a desk that smelled like cinnamon. June went to school and came home and told them everything and nothing filtered. In early December, on a Sunday morning when frost had come overnight and the bird feeder Owen had finally filled in, November was busy with small brown birds. Sloane came around the corner from her apartment and found him sitting on the back step. He had 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one without looking up. She sat beside him on the step. They drank. What are you thinking about? She said. Becca, he said. Sometimes on Sunday mornings I sit out here. She used to come out here before I was up, talking to herself or the birds or, he looked at the feeder. I was never entirely sure which. What did you do when you found her out here? Teased her about it. She said she was keeping the conversation going. Said if you stopped talking to the people you loved, they might think you'd forgotten. Sloane looked at the birds on the feeder, 3 of them, working through the seeds with patient industry. Do you still? She said. Yeah, he drank his coffee, told her about you, about a week after you came in. Sloane went still. What did you tell her? That something had happened, that I didn't know what it was yet. He looked at the feeder. She would have liked you. How do you know? Because you listen to understand, he said. Not to respond, not to fix. She couldn't stand people who listened to respond. She wanted people who just, he paused, received it. What you were saying, Sloane, looked at her cup. She sounds like someone worth becoming, she said. She'd tell you that you already are, he said. He reached over, took her hand. Not a declaration, not a ceremony. just his hand around hers on the cold December morning, while the birds worked at the feeder and the frost on the grass caught the light, and Portland went about its Sunday around them. She looked at their hands, looked at the yard, looked at the low winter sky, and didn't say a word. Because there was nothing left to say, not then. Everything that needed saying had been said, in pieces, over 2 months, in a garage and a hospital, and a backyard and a yellow kitchen. The conversation had been long and it had been real, and this, right now, was just the quiet after, which turned out to be its own kind of answer. In February, Owen fixed the kitchen faucet that had been dripping since October. He was under the sink on a Tuesday evening. Sloane was at the table with something for work. June was on the floor doing homework and announcing the answers to long division problems out loud as she arrived at them, for her own confirmation. Owen said from under the sink, "We should get married." June's pencil stopped. Sloane put her reading down. He came out from under the cabinet. Looked at her. He'd said it the way he said things that mattered, simply, without performance. The way you said something you'd been certain about for a while, and had finally found the right moment for, which turned out to be a Tuesday under the kitchen sink. "Okay," Sloane said. "Okay? Yes." He looked at June on the floor. June had resumed writing. Without looking up, she said, "Finally." Owen went back under the sink, fixed the faucet, and that was that. The wedding was in April, on a Saturday morning before Belmont Street got busy. Owen had asked Sloane where she wanted it, and she'd said here, the garage, which was the answer he'd been hoping for and hadn't expected. Dot had been there since 6:30. She'd moved every tool to the back room and filled the space with things that bloomed. Oregon wildflowers from the Saturday market on Salmon Street. White lights strung across the rafters in long even rows. Folding chairs from the church 2 blocks over, borrowed and arranged. The garage smelled like motor oil and hyacinths, and the coffee from Dot's that she'd been running back and forth all morning. 40 people. Neighbors. Regulars. Mr. Patterson, in his good coat, hat in his hands, arrived 20 minutes early and sat in the front row, because he said he didn't want to miss anything. Greg, who had flown in from Seattle and stood near the back, looking simultaneously overwhelmed and deeply pleased. Owen's sister from Bend, who had driven up the night before and spent the evening in Dot's kitchen helping with the flowers and periodically making Owen show her his hands to check for motor oil. Ruth Whitfield had driven from Montana. 16 hours. She'd told Sloane she wasn't missing it for anything, and that was final. She'd arrived 2 days before and spent both evenings at the kitchen table with June, who had shown Ruth every drawing she'd made in the past 6 months, including the 6-wheeled race car, which Ruth had examined seriously and said she thought the aerodynamics were actually sound. June adored her immediately. Ruth had met Owen the evening before the wedding. She'd shaken his hand and looked at him for a long, steady moment. The way someone looked when they were making a decision. "I've been hoping someone would take care of her," she said. Owen looked at her. "She takes care of herself. She doesn't need me for that." Ruth smiled. The full version. The one Sloane had. "That's exactly right," she said. "That's the right answer." June was the flower girl. She had prepared for this role with characteristic seriousness. She wore a white dress that she and Dot had chosen at the shop on Hawthorne, and small white shoes that she'd already scuffed on the left heel because she was June. She carried a basket of petals and she placed them 2 at a time, evenly, deliberately, the way someone performed a task that mattered. When she reached the front, she stopped, looked at Sloane. "You're not nervous," she said, out loud, in front of 40 people. "A little," Sloane said. June nodded, like this was acceptable. She moved to stand beside Owen and took his hand with both of hers. "We've got you," she said. The person doing the ceremony waited 1 beat, then began. Owen had told Sloane the week before that he'd been trying to write something and everything he wrote came out wrong. She'd said, "Say what's true when you get there." He'd said that was the problem. He was never sure if the true things came out in the right order. She'd said there was no right order. He stood in front of her in his good shirt in the garage that smelled like oil and hyacinths, and looked at her and said what was true. "Becca told me to teach June kindness, and to love again." He stopped, just for a beat. She saw further ahead than I did. He looked at Sloane, steady. "You walked into this garage in the rain and you saw something worth staying for, before I knew I was worth staying for. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you were right about that." Sloane had promised herself she would not cry. She did not keep that promise. She took a breath, looked at him, at June beside him, holding his hand with both of hers, watching with the gravity of someone overseeing something of great importance. I spent 10 years building things meant to last, she said. Systems, platforms, things designed to scale, and I was good at it. But I'd forgotten what I'd built them for. She looked at June first, then back at Owen. You didn't fix me. I want to say that clearly. You didn't fix me and I didn't fix you. We were both already, mostly all right. She heard someone laugh softly from the chairs. Dot, almost certainly. But you reminded me who I was before I got so busy being someone else. And this? She looked at the garage. The lights and the flowers and the letters still tacked near the door, and the oil stains on the concrete that no amount of cleaning had fully lifted. This is who I am. Right here. This is the thing I built that I'm proudest of. She looked at him. I choose this every day. Starting now. Owen squeezed her hand. The ceremony finished. The word was said. He kissed her, and the 40 people made the sound 40 people made when something they'd been quietly hoping for had finally arrived. June raised one small fist. In the air. The reception was lunch. Dot's food, too much of it, the kind of abundance that came from a woman who expressed everything important through feeding people. The table along the back wall held more food than 40 people could reasonably eat, and everyone ate it anyway. Ruth sat with June and showed her photographs from Montana. The fields in summer, the particular hawk that had been sitting on the same fence post for 12 years, the kitchen where Sloane had grown up. June studied each one and asked questions with the thoroughness she brought to everything. Ruth answered all of them. Miss Patterson ate 3 pieces of pie and nobody commented on it. Greg gave a toast that began as a formal account of Sloane's professional accomplishments, got 2 sentences in, and then stopped. He lowered his notes, looked at her. The first time she called me from Portland, he said, she sounded different. I couldn't name it then. I can now. He looked at Owen. She sounded like someone who'd remembered something important. He raised his glass. Thank you for helping her remember. Owen's sister cried from the second toast onward and did not apologize for it. Dot did not cry. She said this firmly to anyone who asked. Her eyes were wet for 4 hours. Late in the afternoon, Owen and Sloane stood together near the back of the garage while the 40 people moved around them. June was on the floor beside Ruth, showing her grandmother a new drawing. A house this time with a garden with 3 figures in front of it. Is this what you thought it would look like? Owen said. I didn't think about it, Sloane said. I was building other things. And now that you see it? She looked at the room, at the lights and the wildflowers, and the letters from customers and the oil stains on the floor. At June explaining the drawing to Ruth with serious gestures. At Dot cutting someone a 4th piece of pie with the expression of a woman who had decided everyone was getting a 4th piece whether they'd asked or not. At all of it. It's better, she said, than anything I would have known to build. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him. After everyone had gone and June had fallen asleep still in her dress, one shoe on and one somewhere in the garage, after Ruth had gone to her hotel and Greg had caught his flight, and Mr. Patterson had driven home in his Buick that ran clean and wood for years, after Dot had washed the last of the dishes and hugged Sloane with both arms and whispered something in her ear that Sloane would carry. For a long time they sat on the back step. Same step. Same 2 chairs pulled up close. Coffee because the day had been long and the evening was cool and some things you kept. The bird feeder was busy even in the dark. Owen had filled it that morning. Portland above them was doing what it did on clear April nights, which would surprise you. Gaps in the clouds, real stars, enough of them. Sloane leaned her head on his shoulder. He rested his head on hers. The city went on around them, quiet and unhurried. A dog barking 2 streets over, a car passing on Belmont. Dot's light going off next door. Sloane reached into the pocket of her dress. She'd moved the drawing there that morning. From the jacket. Wherever she went it went. She unfolded it, held it where they could both see it in the light from the garage window. Faint but enough, lines and shapes, a building and a road, a person somewhere in the middle of both. Owen looked at it for a moment. What is it? He said. I didn't know when I drew it. She looked at the figure in the middle. Now I think it's this, right here. He looked at the yard, the feeder and the chairs and the frost-burned grass coming back green at the edges now that spring had finally decided to arrive. Not a bad place to end up, he said. It's not the end, she said. He looked at her. It's where we are, she said. In the middle of something good. She folded the paper, put it back in her pocket. He took her hand. And they sat there on the back step of Calloway's auto on a clear April night, while Portland went quietly about its business around them. Not talking, not planning, not building anything, just there, together. Which was, it turned out, exactly what they'd both been looking for. Long before the rain. Long before the light at the end of Belmont Street. Long before the bell above the door, and the question that didn't have an answer, and the child in mismatched socks who looked at a stranger and asked, without any particular concern for what the answer might be, "Are you lost?" "Yeah, a little, that's okay, you just have to stop driving so fast."